Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and it is Writing Wednesday, so it must be noon on Wednesday because that's when I do it. Um, and this is where I answer your questions about all things writing. So, you know, reading, writing, techniques, states of mind, um, answering. You can ask your questions in the comments, or if you'd like to write to me on my website, janetfitchwrites.com, I am happy to create a Writing Wednesday around your question. So this is your time. Um, I'm just here to give you a hand and see if I can steer you away from the cliffs. Although one writer's cliffs may be another writer's, you know, uh, bungee jumping or, the free jumping or whatever, some people do. Some people are daredevils. So, uh, and if that's you, just know that that's you. And you can take whatever I'm saying and see how it might apply or might not apply. Um, my opinions are definitely my own. Uh, so we're on the run up to Thanksgiving. So a lot of writers are working really hard to get something on the page before the relatives show up, before they have to do turkey and all that. And if you are a writer and you are hosting Thanksgiving, let me say that the less you do, the better. Make the turkey, make one of the sides like potatoes, and let the guests bring everything else. Um, we're way too performative about this particular meal. And as writers, you need to set up some boundaries so that you can continue to work up until the day. If you are planning to host 14 people and cook everything yourself, you're stressing yourself out, and you're definitely going to have trouble engaging with your own muse, who's going like, yeah, turkey, turkey, whatever. Enjoy the people, enjoy the day, but if I can be the big sister for a second, you don't have to do it all yourself. Um, so anyway, hi Linda, hi Lewis, hi Sayward, good to see y'all. I should say that signups are still open for my class in dialogue in fiction, which is a very different thing than dialogue as we think of it. We think of plays, generally speaking, dialogue in plays, where people are basically on an empty stage or maybe a beautifully set stage, and everything is emitted orally. We can't know what people are thinking. Um, and it's an art. The dialogue on the page is a very different creature. And what's sad is that people are we're so affected by visual medium. We watch TV and movies, and our ideas about dialogue are generally related to film and stage. So that when we come to the page, we are creating something that isn't really right for the page. Um, it's not balanced dialogue. It's not often it's not compressed, because dialogue in the films, it goes by so quick and people aren't reading it, they're experiencing it passively. So you could get away with lines like, what did you mean by that? I mean, that's not $1 million dialogue. That's like nickel dialogue. People are always saying stuff like that. They're telling us things we already know. They're repeating things to another person because we don't know what they're thinking, and it generally is so passive. It goes by, and people don't sit up and go, God, this dialogue is just terrible. Whereas on the page, they look at it and they have time to absorb it, it's just like, this dialogue is not good. I don't know about you. I open a book before I buy it, or when I sit down to decide whether I want to read it or not, I go right to a dialogue scene, and I'm looking for an expert handling of dialogue. I'm looking for compression. I'm looking for uniqueness of expression. I'm looking for the world. The world keeps going. People don't start speaking and suddenly the world disappears and people emit dialogue. No, it keeps going. So dialogue is very important to me. My students always say that Janet hates dialogue. I do not hate dialogue. I love dialogue. I love good dialogue. I've had 2 movies made from books of mine, and I'm having a 3rd one that's looks like it's shooting in January, a short story, The Method, out of LA Noir. And I kind of think it's because of that the dialogue is good and people can read it and imagine actors saying those lines. I don't write it with an idea of film because I think that fiction can do so much more than film. Fiction, we can know what the character's thinking, so we can see a contrast between what they say and what they think. It's very interesting. But there are a lot of rhythmic things that probably serve you well in a visual medium, but you can do so much more in a dialogue scene on the page. And a good dialogue scene, good dialogue it's the hardest thing, because it's not just it's everything that happens while the people are talking. People observe, there's gesture, there's tone of voice, there's facial expression, all the things that in a visual medium, the actor and the director and the cinematographer and the person who scores it and the person who edits it and all that bring to that medium. As a fiction writer, you get to do it all. You're God of your own planet, and use your powers. So I'm teaching this class. It's an intensive workshop. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th of December. So Friday night, Saturday, 2 sessions on Sunday. So it's intense. It's 2 hours each because it's Zoom and people can't sit for more than 2 hours. So if that sounds like, you're ready for some of the finishing touches on your fiction, especially people who are doing NaNoWriMo this month, you're going to have a lot of stuff, and then you're going to want to start shaping it after this is over. So this is a good time to take it before the holidays start. So initial advice is, don't kill yourself over Thanksgiving. Let your guests bring stuff, including the guys. The guys can buy a pie. The guys can buy a bag of Doritos or a bean dip or whatever you trust them to get. So everybody can bring something, and then you have a stress-free and wonderful Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, I thought I would respond to a comment that I got last week, and I did not have a chance to address it. Hi, Amy. Hi. Oh, We're just finished the 2nd draft of her historical using NaNoWriMo, which is ostensibly writing a novel in a month. It just is a big shot in the arm to concentrate and move forward. Hi, Lorraine. So the question, the comment had been about from Shona Patel. I don't know if Shona's here today, but this says, I hate to talk or say anything about my work in progress. I feel the energy dissipates. Is this normal? So I am doing today's Writing Wednesday on rituals, superstitions, spells. We writers tend to be obsessive type of people. That's why we can work on something for 3, 4, 5 years. You have to be kind of obsessional to be able to do that. over time. Fiction writers, especially novelists, tend to be obsessional people. Um, and so I thought, let's talk about this. Some of the superstitions, rituals, all this kind of stuff, having to have the right pen. It can be as simple as that. Um, and some, I have a few different thoughts about this. So first we'll talk about Shona's. I hate to talk about anything when my work is in progress, say anything about work in progress. The energy dissipates. Is this normal? This is a good sign that you don't want to talk too much about a work in progress, because one of the early let's not say mistakes, because phases that an emerging writer often goes through, or not so emerging, but in that place, is they remove they're excited about what they're writing. So they have a great idea or something, and they just sit around and talk about the book that they're going to write. Usually it's in the future. This is what I'm going to write. And it dissipates the urgency to get it on the page, because you've told the story. It has become an oral story rather than a written story. So it kind of develops a bit of that eggshell that we talk about when you don't write for a while. Your work develops kind of a shell that then you have to crack open. When you've told the story, the major points, to someone, then something inside is like, I've told that story now. And you're not quite as excited about it as you were before you told everybody about it. It's kind of like trading on your creative process for a social situation. And that is always, it's always takes energy away from the project. It's like trying to impress a boyfriend. I don't know if anybody had ever tried to do this when they were younger, try to impress a girlfriend, a boyfriend, somebody that you, by telling them about your work. And several things happen. One, indifference. That's not good, because suddenly you've told your story and somebody has basically energetically rejected it. It's like, yeah, cool. Then also it becomes a commodity, a social commodity, where you are exchanging your creative work for some, and not finished work, not even written usually, for somebody's approval or attention. In either case, whether they like it or not, whether they're interested or not, you're distorting your art by using it as a trade commodity in a social interaction, instead of this being your art form. Then you're protecting it, and you're, letting that thing grow. Maybe it's a mushroom and has to grow in the dark. So I would say I understand this really well, and I think that Shona's interest in not showing it to people is a really good idea. Not talking it, because it does lose energy. You become a little divorced from it. It becomes a shtick instead of work that you're nurturing in process. Yeah, so I'd say be careful about that. On the other hand, one has to share. If you're in a writer's group, you're going to be sharing work that is in process. So that is a matter of picking the audience, picking writers. And the thing is, they have skin in the game, as they say. They are showing you theirs. It's not just you showing yours. They're showing theirs with an eye to um, improving the work. And the work is on the page. You've already written it. Now you're sharing it as an embodied idea, as opposed to just telling us, winding the story orally. And that'll save your life when you have a writers group that you can share your story with. I'm on a chapter right now. My writers group has seen it 3 times. And when I show it to them, I can see where it's not landing. I can see where I don't have a clear emotional trajectory. It doesn't have the scene does not have a clear emotional arc. It's in there, but it's muddled. So each time I'm pulling the decorative stuff out. I just happen to write that stuff. But the important thing is that's what we'll do in dialogue, is to get down to the actual movement of the scene, scene and story. So the scene, the movement of the scene, it goes from one emotion to another emotion. It stays in one place until the movement has happened. Something happens where it can't go back to the way it was before. And I just slave over that. This will be the 3rd week on this one, where I'm just trying to get that clear movement in the dialogue scene. So where's the conflict? It was all too runny. I don't like it. There was something wrong with it. And the more by the time the 2nd time around, it was clear to me that it was too soft. The scene was soft. It didn't have the conflict that needed. If I hadn't shown it to them, if it just whirled around in my mind, I probably would never have figured it out. So sometimes you have to show it to someone whose opinion you trust, someone who understands what you can do, has faith in you, believes in the project you're working on, and then reads something and goes, it's sort of romancy, isn't it? It's like, oh, yeah, it is. Okay, So showing it, talking about it when it's not written is always a bad idea. Talking to it when you have something, that's a good idea. Then sometimes as you're going along, you're looking for, say, a witness or an informant or often somebody who's had the experience that is in your book that you have not had. So say you have somebody who's dating someone who's a wheat farmer in Kansas. And so it's not a major character maybe, but it's somebody that you really could use talking to somebody who's a wheat farmer in Kansas, or a wheat farmer in Washington State, or a wheat farmer somewhere who can, you can get a little more detail from and check and see, am I getting this right? Then you'll have to tell the story, but it's not going to be like an evening's entertainment where you're drinking wine and regaling the gang about your book, which is like trading your work for social acceptance, that's pretty bad. Hi, Holly. So what you're doing is, with people like that, is you are giving the what I call the XYZ of your story. When I taught scene and story, I taught a couple of different ways of describing a story. But it's basically, the setup and the payoff, and you don't even have to do the payoff. You can just do the setup. It's like, hey, I'm writing a story about this woman who runs away from her bad marriage in New York and ends up in a small town in Kansas, and she's dating a wheat farmer. Does anybody know a wheat farmer that I can talk to? People need to know enough of the story that they can respond to whatever it is that you need. So you do have to get used to describing your story in a sentence or two sentences. I used to be a typesetter, and one of my jobs was on a small town newspaper, was to take the TV guide basically and typeset it, and noticed how well those little publications summarized a whole movie. It's like setup and payoff. When a Kansas girl is swept off to a magical land, she learns there's no place like home, that kind of thing. Setup and payoff. So you learn to describe your novel in a sentence. So that's not regaling the gang at Christmas with the detail, and then she does this, and then he does, you're not trading on this for a social currency. But you do have to, somebody's going to ask you, especially if you've been working a couple of years on it, and they're like, well, what have you been doing? How's that book coming? What's it about? People are going to ask, what's it about? And by having an idea of what the book is about, by being able to describe it in a sentence or two sentences, it will give you a better and clearer idea of what that book is about. So that as you work second draft, third draft, fourth draft, you're always shaping it. And it's like, once you figure out that, this is the growth and development of a poet, or the growth and development of a moral conscience, of a moral universe, then it helps you shape your book. So being able to describe it in a sentence is a good developmental thing. So I wouldn't say don't be superstitious about not talking about the book, but be judicious about talking about the book. Who you're telling, how much you're telling, to who, and don't trade on it for a cool anecdote over drinks. It's not social currency. So that's the first kind of superstitious thing, ritual, superstition, etc. I want to talk about. Then I want to talk about the magic pen. The magic pen. It's like I always write, I like to write with a fountain pen that has a calligraphy tip. If I'm writing by hand, generally I write on the computer. But when I really get stuck, I'll get off and write by hand. But try not to be overly superstitious about that pen. That if you don't write in green pen, everything's going to be garbage. Try very hard. Hi, Llewellyn. He's saying one sentence summary is so difficult. Yeah, it is. It's a great handhold for yourself. Even two. It's a great handhold for yourself as you edit, as you write, as you get towards the end of a draft. And then as you start over, to remember, like, what the hell is this about? It helps you see what you might need to reinforce certain things and what might turn out to be a subplot, and then how does a subplot reflect the major story. It's super diagnostically super interesting. Amy says, I was planning on NaNoWriMo like hell this year. So excited, but I can't get started. Every time I sit down, I end up with maybe 2 pages. 2 pages is good. Then start an entirely new project. the next day because I doubt the previous one. Write short shorts. Write short shorts. Don't try to write a full project. If you don't have anything in mind, then spend that time, like today is complete. I'll do 4 pages or 6 pages, and then that's complete. And then tomorrow I'll do something else that's complete. I have a tangible idea. She says, the pattern's gone on for years. I have a tangible idea, but I don't know how to progress from the first scene onward. You don't have to start with the first scene. Start with the first scene you see clearly. And just write scenes. Write that first scene you see clearly. You know, that time your brother took the roller skate and smashed you in the head with it. Fictionalized, of course. Write that scene. And then something else that you see really clearly, you know. The girl's grandfather took her to the track and she bet on gray horse because she liked gray horses, and it came in. Write that scene. Anything you see clearly from anywhere in the sort of the nebula of the project. Just pick out some scene that you see clearly and write that. Write it, throw it in a box. Write something else that you see clearly. It doesn't have to be a day, you know. It's just you're getting these pieces that are solid, like rocks, and eventually you can stack them in mortar and put them together somehow, usually 3-ring binder, and you figure out some kind of order. So that's my advice, is don't try to do it A, B, C, D, E. If you can see F really clearly, just write that. And then maybe you see J really clearly. You write that. And maybe you see something coming after J, K. I see K. Okay, I can write K. Just remember to write scenes that go somewhere. Something happens. That'll help you a lot. So let's talk about the magic pen and so on. Okay, so anyway, I understand the need for rituals. Writers, we all have rituals, but we are very obsessive people. And you don't want to do things that back you up from the book. That I have to do this before I can write. Then I have to do this before I do this before I can write. And then I can't have to do this before I do this before I do this before I write. And before you know it, you're spending your whole day fulfilling these rituals instead of writing. So the fewer rituals you have, the better. I'm really, really believe in not having rituals as much as you possibly can. If you tend to want to just sit down and center yourself, you know, ring a little bell, you know, if that helps, calling the spirits to order, just keep it short. Keep it short. Settle in, keep it short, go to work. Try not to have to write your artist pages and all that before you work. If you need to settle in, just like, you know, breathe a little bit, ring a bell. If you want to burn some incense, that doesn't take any time, go ahead and do that. You know, if you need the magic pen, you know, make sure you have a whole box of them. But things that involve a lot of time and a lot of anxiety, that if you don't do them, you're not going to get anywhere. Be careful about having to be in a certain place, having to be, you know, I only write at night. I only write during the day. I can only write if nobody's home. I can only write if I knock 3 times. I mean, this is where you start getting into obsessive behavior, and it doesn't serve you, you know, does not. Don't set yourself up for that. Um, then there's the yeah, you get bogged down in the ritual. You don't want that. Keep it short. Then there's like I have my tutelary spirits. These are the writers who speak to me. They inspire me. Maybe they're not the writers that I would like to, I mean, you notice like there's no Dostoevsky here. There's no, actually, there's no novelists here. I guess Anais was a novelist. But they're people whose voices and mood I like in my head. I don't do this before I write. I do this at night. I do this after I've written. I get in touch with them maybe before bed, even. And so I've got mine are Dylan Thomas, Sei Shonagon. She was at court the same time as Lady Murasaki. She wrote the Pillow Book of Sei Shonagon, and she is a certain sensibility that I have. And they talk to each other. This is Carl Sandburg. I like his kind of democratic American voice. This is Tennessee Williams. I like his romanticism and the fragility of his characters. And Anais Nin, who was my great inspiration to become a writer in the first place. So I just sit, as at night, I'll sit with them. I'll have a problem with my writing, something that happened during the day or didn't happen during the day. That's where I light the incense and ring the bells and all that stuff. And I sit there with a pad of paper and I talk to these people. I say, well, okay, anybody have any comment about what I should be doing with Luke? Say I have a character, Luke. What should I be doing with Luke? And these characters, these people will talk to me. And they have different opinions. They argue with each other, so they don't even know what they're doing together. Sei Shonagon was, the ultimate aristocrat. Carl Sandburg was the man, the voice of the people. These are aspects of myself, the romantic, oh my God, the Tennessee Williams part of me, the poetry of Tennessee Williams, the poetry of Dylan Thomas. And he was quite a trickster, and he was, he was a handful. And so what he says is really interesting on the artistic level. Anais was very sensitive to people and their moods, and she would do all kinds of things to get what she wanted. She's a very worldly person. So having the five of them talk to each other is really fun. But I wouldn't do that before I wrote. I would save that till after, usually in the evenings. It's more of a meditation, creative visualization. But what I do in the morning is I get up, I go for a walk if I can. I make coffee. I do this meditation and free write, which is poetry, with Peggy Dobrier. I know some of you know I do this. So if you're interested, she's at Ad Hoc Inc. INK. Peggy Dobrier. It's her email is Ad Hoc Inc. INK. At, I think she's Gmail. Oh, Yahoo, at Yahoo. And I do that for 45 minutes. Meditate, which calms me down, gets me, centered, loosens some of the anxiety. And then I write poetry for 15 minutes, which is really fun and gets the language flowing. And then I, get some more coffee and I start in writing. I try not to have to do too many things before I write. I don't have to clean my desk. I clean my desk after I write. I just sit down and it's a heap of, it's a real heap. But once I'm writing, I don't really care. So other superstitions, do other people have that, have anything like that? There was a question in here. Any tips on naming your book? Oh, Nicole says, tips on naming your book. You either get the name right away. You either have the name before you've even written 4 chapters, or it comes last. And it is really, names are difficult. There is a wonderful writer who passed away very young. He had 7 books of poetry. He had 2 collections of short stories and a novel. His name was Donald Rawley, Rawley. And he wrote the most lyrical, the most beautiful. Actually, he knew Tennessee Williams. I think he slept with him. He died very young. He wrote up until the last minute. And he said, Janet, if you turn numerically to a page 3/4 of the way through your book, and you open that page, your title will be on that page. And I thought that was really good, really interesting advice, because it means that the meaning of your book will unfold around 3/4 of the way through. It's where you get all the way through the struggle, and then the meaning starts to unfold of what you're really doing on the page. You can call it theme, you can call it, I don't use terms like that. I like to just say, what the hell is this all about? When that starts to become clear, you just, he says you open it and your title will be on that page. Sometimes, yes. Other things, I like poetry. So I usually will look through poetry to see if I can find a good name. Short stories often come from names of, like a line of poetry. The short story, the title of the short story that became White Oleander was a line from a Dylan Thomas poem, The House Not Right in the Head. She's come to the house not right in the head, girl mad as birds, etc. Or was that might have been Painted Black. It was Painted Black, House Not Right in the Head. So poems are wonderful. Try not to steal the title of the book, but using a line from a poem is very nice, or even the title of a poem. But I like the line from a poem much better. The Bible, people have certainly used lines from the Bible as titles. They work very well because it's very poetic. A line from a song, Painted Black. That was a line from a song. There were so many titles that I considered for that second book. It had been, I'd considered These Days, which is a Jackson Browne song that Nico did in a certain way that had a resignation to it. Don't remind me of my failures. I have not forgotten them. These days has a certain feel. Also, Fairest of the Seasons, Dying in the Fairest of the Seasons. That would have been a really good title. Where else do I get titles from? Sometimes you'll have a friend who is really good at titles. I have a friend who's really good at titles. I can give him a big list and he'll pick stuff. Generally, don't let your publisher pick your title. Try to have something good by the time the publisher accepts your book. I don't have a title for this new one. I have something I don't like. That was always the title of it. And I still don't like it. So I will be working the poetry shelves pretty heavy to find something, or music, to find something I like better. than what I've got. Titles are super important. So let's see. Yale says rituals can be related to anxiety and I can let myself get bogged down. Yeah. Gotta watch that. So Holly says, I've had writer's block lately. My mind just stops any ideas. I have writing Wednesdays, whole writing Wednesdays on writer's block. So I've got a lot of them are on YouTube now. So Janet Fitch's Writing Wednesdays, and go ahead and subscribe. That helps me. And look, it's easier to find things on YouTube. And you'll see, I have so many ideas for writer's block, and what the psychological and then also tools to deal with that. So good luck. Everybody has it. My biggest comment is it's just like hiking. Imagine hiking and there's a huge boulder that fell off the mountain and it's blocking the trail. Don't try to go through it. Don't try to push the boulder off the trail. That's my biggest advice. Go around, pick something from later in the book or another scene or write from somebody else's point of view. I have lots of ideas, but just don't try to push the boulder off. You'll spend years and it still won't move. Here's another question. Heidi says, I read and edit previous material before I write. Sometimes it interferes with my actual writing. Yeah, I do that too. I write and and sometimes it interferes. And then I just have to say, okay, good enough for now. I might write some notes on top or in the middle or wherever the problem seems to be. Say enough, because there's a certain point of diminishing returns for any kind of editing that you're doing. And you have to start, as a writer, you want to be sensitive to when you are just raking the grass. Anybody see like the Zen garden where they're raking the sand? They rake the sand or gravel. If you find yourself raking it this way, changing it for the different, but not for the better, it's time to move on. So that's what's happened with this scene that I'm working on, is I've gotten to a certain point where I know it still probably has a way to go, but I'm changing it for the different. So time to stop and move on. Only change for the better. If you notice change for the better, good. But if you're just re-editing, changing stuff to change it, time to move on. Alrighty, what else do we have here? Say a word. Almost finished with first draft of my next contemporary. The working title is Untitled Vin's Story. It makes me crazy that I don't have a title already. Yeah, it does. I don't have. I have a title I don't like, and it's gonna be that until it changes. Mainly, I do like you. I'm naming it after the characters for the time being, and that's not going to be it either. So in your off time, when you're not writing, in the afternoon when you're already burnt and you can't think of anything to do, you make yourself a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you do, and just look through some poetry books. Think of your theme. Think about what it's about. And then look at poetry that deals with that subject. You're often going to find a line eventually, or sooner or later. Who knows? It's also so serendipitous, but you might find a line. Listen to some music that seems to cover the mood of the piece, and then see if there's a line in the lyric that it's like, wow, that would be a really good title. Let's see, what else? Hi, Pam. Uh, so other rituals and superstitions. I have a day of the week thing. I like Wednesdays. I have a certain numbers. I like nines. So I generally, if I'm submitting a book, I'll submit on a 9 day, like a 9, 18, 27, or 5. That has a certain feel for me. Um, Anything that doesn't take time, that doesn't push you away. If you think I can only write in the rising sun, or I can only write when the moon is waxing, I can only edit when the moon is waning, really try to avoid that kind of stuff. Oh, it's Mercury retrograde. I can't get anything decent new during Mercury retrograde. Oh, yeah, you can. Yes, you can. Try not to be superstitious about that kind of stuff. You know, um, if have to revisit something, then that's Mercury retrograde, you know. But I'd say superstition hurts you more than it helps you when it comes to producing steadily. Um, you don't want a lot of fluctuation that I can only do it when blank. I learned a lot about this kind of thing when I had a little kid. I mean, I used to think I could only write when I had, a free day or free afternoon or, free big chunk of time. And once I had a kid, it was like, just give me 15 minutes. I'll do something. Really start to value those 15 minutes. Keep track of what do you really do in a day? Did I really work 4 hours, or did I spend 3.5 hours on social media and looking stuff up and reading articles by other people, or working on, you know, some minor project? You have to be honest with yourself. And sometimes just keeping track is really helpful, because then it's like, oh yeah, I didn't really work that 4 hours anyway. I only worked half an hour. So why don't I just sit down and work half an hour, and then admit that I'm going to goof off, and then do it with a clear conscience. um, so let's see what else. The magic pencil, the magic this, it has to be. I can't, like, I've worked this room. I have written uh, everything that I've written since 1988. I've written in this room. But does that mean that I can only write in this room? No. No. I've written all over the place. I've written in hotel rooms. I've written in people's borrowed cabins a lot. Borrowed, guest rooms, basements, and so forth. So yeah, try not to cling to that stuff. Really notice if you're getting superstitious, to distance yourself, because we're all a little OCD. We don't want to be knocking on walls and doors and counting and all that stuff, you know. So Heidi says, I get waylaid by researching for what I'm writing about. Yeah. Okay, so research. You can look this up on my on that YouTube Writing Wednesdays, because it's something that it's a research rapture. It's something that happens. I mean, I was a history major, research rapture, but now everybody has it. We didn't have the internet. We got research rapture in the library, but now everybody gets it. We're looking up a souffle recipe, and before we know it, it's 3 a.m, and we're looking at pictures of lemurs in Madagascar, and we haven't done a damn thing. Um, so my advice to the research rapture is to pay attention, to write the scene you're writing, and do the research necessary to write this scene, and don't go chasing rabbits, you'll end up in the next county wet without one shoe and have to slog back home. Um, just research what you need for this scene, and then that'll keep you write first and then research to make sure and check and get details and all that. So you're writing the book you're writing. You're not chasing a story like that. Fiction, you have to concentrate. It's not just random research. All right. Well, if I don't get any other questions, I'd like to again to invite you to check out my Dialogue for Fiction Writers weekend intensive at communityofwriters.org, and to try to enjoy Thanksgiving without becoming everybody's tour guide and chef and entertainment director. Try to apportion that stuff to other people. I mean, as a writer, just get used to getting other people and getting them used to the fact that they're going to have to carry their weight. You can't be the person who does it all. And right, it's much easier for people who don't have anything that anybody expects them to do. But a lot of us do have lives, and we are involved with other people, and so thinking about your time and thinking about your attention level and how do you maintain your own work, your own attention level, and chuck a turkey in the oven. You don't. It's not a performance. You're not going to get a grade. You're going to get a grade on your work, on your writing, but not on how many sides you made. Okay. All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.